The Power of Not Reacting. How to Master Your Emotions, Stop Overthinking, and Stay Calm by Rise Mind. Your emotions are not your friend, because your survival and your success depend on you understanding this. Your emotions are not your friend. They are not some sacred inner voices guiding you toward truth. They are biological relics. They are chemical reactions designed for a world that no longer exists, a world where an immediate emotional response meant the difference between life and death on the savannah. But in today's world, those same impulses are sabotaging your career. They are destroying your relationships. They are keeping you trapped in a cycle of overthinking, regret, and silent failure. Every single day, you are being tested. You get triggered by a condescending comment from a colleague, and you fire back with a defensive remark you'll regret by dinner. You feel a wave of overwhelm, and you quit on a goal that was only days away from a breakthrough. You feel the heat of anger rise in your chest during a disagreement with someone you love, and you let words fly that tear down years of trust in 10 seconds. In those moments, you aren't in control. You are a puppet. You are being moved by strings made of cortisol and adrenaline. You are a slave to a 12-millisecond chemical reaction in your brain, and you don't even realize it. But here is the secret: the top 1% of high achievers, the modern Stoics, and the most powerful leaders on earth know that you don't. Your greatest power is not your intelligence. It isn't your talent. It isn't even your hard work. Your greatest power is your non-reaction. The ability to feel the surge of anger, the sting of an insult, or the paralyzing weight of anxiety, to acknowledge it, and then to choose your response based on logic, strategy, and long-term vision, rather than the primitive impulse screaming in your head. This audiobook, The Power of Not Reacting, is your blueprint for emotional sovereignty. Over the next 2 hours, we are going to dismantle the mechanics of your mind. We are going to explore why your brain is literally wired to sabotage you, and how you can begin to rewire those neural pathways for unshakable calm. We will cover the gray rock method for dealing with toxic people, the neuroscience of the Amygdala Hijack, and the advanced Stoic techniques used to stay cool in high-stakes environments. This is not about becoming a robot. This is not about suppressing your feelings or pretending you don't have them. Suppression is just a different form of being controlled. This is about taking back the remote control of your life. It's about mastering the space between what happens to you and how you respond. In that space lies your freedom. In that space lies your power. If you are ready to stop overthinking, stop overreacting, and become the most composed person in any room you enter, then listen closely. The training begins now. Chapter 1. The Hidden Cost of Reactivity. Why you are losing power. In the high-stakes game of life, there is a currency more valuable than gold, more influential than status, and more elusive than time. That currency is your composure. Every time you enter a room, every time you open your phone, and every time you engage in a difficult conversation, you are carrying a remote control that dictates your actions, your words, and your future. The tragedy of the modern human experience is that most of us don't actually hold our own remote. We hand it over to the first person who annoys us, the first email that stresses us, or the first driver who cuts us off in traffic. When you react impulsively, you aren't just expressing a feeling, you are handing over your power. You are telling the world, my internal state is at the mercy of your external behavior. The invisible tax on success. We often think of a reaction as an isolated event, a flare-up of temper, a defensive text, or a nervous retreat. But in reality, emotional reactivity is a tax. It is an invisible, compounding interest rate that you pay on your reputation, your health, and your bank account. In professional environments, this is known as the glass ceiling of reactivity. You can have the highest IQ in the room, the most impressive credentials, and the strongest work ethic, but if you cannot control your emotions under fire, you will never be trusted with true leadership. Decision makers don't look for the loudest person, they look for the steadiest one. Why? Because a reactive leader is a liability. If a competitor knows what makes you angry, they can control your strategy. If a subordinate knows what makes you flustered, they can manipulate your focus. The cost of losing your cool in a professional setting is not just a moment of embarrassment. It is the lost promotion, the retracted investment, and the silent consensus among your peers that you are not ready for the next level. You are paying for your 5-second outburst with 5 years of career stagnation. Silence as a power move. In a world that cannot stop talking, silence is the ultimate power move. We have been conditioned to believe that we must have the last word to win an argument. We think that by reacting loudly, we are showing strength. The opposite is true. Aggression is often a mask for insecurity. When you react immediately to a provocation, you reveal that the person who provoked you has successfully reached your core. You have validated their attack. However, when you meet a provocation with silence or a measured, non-reactive response, you create a vacuum. You force the other person to sit in the discomfort of their own aggression. In negotiations, the first person to speak after a long silence often loses. In conflict, the person who remains calm becomes the psychological anchor of the room. By refusing to react, you signal that you are unbaitable. You become an enigma. People start to wonder what you're thinking, what you know, and why you are so unfazed. This is how you reclaim the remote control. You demonstrate that your peace is not for sale. The biological hangover of reactivity. The cost of reactivity is not just social, it is deeply biological. When you lose it, your body doesn't just reset the moment you stop shouting. You have triggered an amygdala hijack, flooding your system with cortisol and adrenaline. Science shows that after a major emotional reaction, your brain can take up to 48 hours to return to its baseline logical state. This means that one impulsive reaction on a Monday morning can degrade the quality of your decision-making until Wednesday. You are essentially operating with a chemical hangover. You make more mistakes, you misinterpret social cues, and you are more likely to have a second reaction because your fuse is already short. Every time you react, you are physically training your brain to be even more reactive tomorrow. You are practicing your own demise. The relationship tax, the death of 1,000 cuts. In our personal lives, reactivity acts as the death of 1,000 cuts. We often confuse emotional honesty with emotional reactivity. They are not the same. When you react to your spouse, your children, or your friends out of a place of immediate irritation, you are creating a micro-withdrawal of safety. Trust is built in the quiet moments, but it is burned in the reactive ones. Every time you use your words as a weapon because you felt a temporary sting, you are teaching the people you love that it is not safe to be vulnerable with you. Eventually, the people around you start to walk on eggshells. They begin to manage your emotions for you, hiding their truths to avoid your flare-ups. When this happens, true intimacy dies. You might still be in the relationship, but you are paying for your lack of self-control with a lifetime of loneliness. You have traded deep connection for the cheap satisfaction of being right in the moment. Reclaiming your sovereignty. To stop losing power, you must realize that nothing is as expensive as a reaction. Before you speak, before you type, and before you judge, ask yourself, am I about to hand over my control? If someone insults you, they are offering you a gift of poison. If you react, you have accepted the gift. If you remain calm, the gift remains with the giver. This is the essence of emotional sovereignty. It is the realization that while you cannot control the wind, you are the absolute master of your sails. In the chapters to come, we will explore the how, the neural rewiring and psychological tools needed to master this art. But for today, your task is simple. Observe the cost. Look back at the last month of your life. Identify the moments where a reaction cost you a relationship, a sum of money, or a night of sleep. The path to power begins when you realize that your silence is worth more than their drama. The person who cannot be moved is the only person who can move the world.
Chapter 2. Amygdala Hijack, the neuroscience of why you sabotage yourself. To master your emotions, you must first understand that your brain is not a single unified machine. It is a biological, archaeological site, a series of layers built on top of one another over millions of years. At the very top, you have the prefrontal cortex, the seat of logic, strategy, and long-term planning. This is the CEO of your brain. But buried deep beneath that sophisticated exterior lies the limbic system, and at its core, a tiny almond-shaped structure called the amygdala. The amygdala is your brain's personal alarm system. Its only job is to scan the environment for threats and trigger a survival response. The problem? Your amygdala hasn't had a software update in 50,000 years. It cannot tell the difference between a saber-toothed tiger and a condescending comment from your boss. To your biology, a social slight and a physical attack look exactly the same. The 12-millisecond gap. Why you snap. The reason you find it so difficult to stay calm in the heat of the moment is a phenomenon known as the amygdala hijack. In a normal situation, sensory information travels to the thalamus, which then sends the data to the prefrontal cortex to be analyzed. You think, you evaluate, and then you act. However, there is a back door in your brain. When the amygdala perceives a threat, even a psychological one, it intercepts the signal before it ever reaches your logical brain. While your prefrontal cortex takes about 500 milliseconds to process a thought, your amygdala can trigger a full-body emotional response in just 12 milliseconds. This is the neuroscience of why you snap. Your body is reacting to a perceived threat before your conscious mind even knows there's a problem. By the time your logic wakes up, you've already sent the text, yelled at your partner, or quit the project. You have been hijacked. The fight-or-flight chemistry. When the amygdala takes control, it immediately recruits your endocrine system. It signals your adrenal glands to flood your body with cortisol and adrenaline. Adrenaline spikes your heart rate and redirects blood flow from your internal organs to your limbs. Cortisol shuts down non-essential functions, including your immune system, your digestive tract, and, most importantly, your creative thinking. In this state, you lose access to your high-level intelligence. Your peripheral vision literally narrows, and your ability to process complex nuances vanishes. You revert to black-and-white thinking, enemy versus ally, fight versus flight. This is why, during an argument, you can't remember the 5 logical points you wanted to make. Your brain has physically disabled the hardware required for rational debate to prioritize survival. Why your brain chooses sabotage. You might wonder why evolution would leave us with such a volatile system. The answer is simple. Evolution doesn't care if you are happy, successful, or well-liked. It only cares that you survive long enough to pass on your genes. In the wild, it is better to mistake a rustling bush for a tiger 100 times than to mistake a tiger for a rustling bush once. But in the 21st century, this better safe than sorry mechanism is a disaster. When your partner critiques your spending habits, your amygdala senses a threat to your status and resources. It triggers the same death threat response it would use for a predator. You sabotage the relationship to protect yourself from a conversation. You sabotage your career to protect yourself from the discomfort of a presentation. Your brain is essentially burning down your house to kill a spider. The feedback loop of overthinking.
An amygdala hijack doesn't just result in an outward explosion. It often results in an inward implosion, known as overthinking. When the amygdala is active, it searches for proof of the threat. It begins to scan your memories for every time you failed, every time you were rejected, and every worst-case scenario that could happen next. This creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. Your brain creates a threat loop where the emotion fuels the thought and the thought fuels the emotion. This is why you can lie in bed for 4 hours replaying a 10-second interaction. Your logical brain is trying to solve a problem, but your emotional brain won't let go of the alarm. Taking back the remote control. Mastering the power of not reacting starts with acknowledging this biological delay. You cannot stop the amygdala from firing. That is an automated survival mechanism. However, you can learn to bridge the gap between the 12-millisecond emotional surge and your 500-millisecond logical response. The pause is not just a polite suggestion, it is a biological necessity. It is the time required for your prefrontal cortex to come back online and override the primitive alarm. Every second you wait during a trigger is a second you spend reclaiming your intelligence. When you feel that heat in your chest or that sudden spike in your pulse, you must realize this is just chemistry. It is not truth. It is not an emergency. It is simply a 50,000-year-old alarm going off because it doesn't understand modern life. If you can wait 60 seconds, the chemical surge will begin to dissipate and the CEO of your brain will step back into the room. Chapter 3. The 4 Levels of Emotional Mastery, from Victim to Master. Emotional intelligence is not a destination you reach overnight. It is a ladder that you climb. Most people spend their entire lives on the bottom rung, wondering why they are constantly exhausted, why their relationships are turbulent, and why they feel like a passenger in their own lives. They believe that emotions are things that happen to them, rather than signals that they can manage. To master the power of not reacting, you must be honest about where you currently stand. You cannot navigate a map if you don't know your starting point. In this chapter, we will break down the 4 distinct levels of emotional development. As you listen, don't judge yourself, simply observe. Identification is the first step toward transformation. Level 1. Unconscious reactivity, the victim. At level 1, there is no space between a stimulus and a response. If someone cuts you off in traffic, you are angry before you even realize you've gripped the steering wheel. If your partner makes a critical comment, the defensive retort is out of your mouth before you've processed the words. In this stage, you are the victim of your biology. You operate entirely on the 12-millisecond amygdala circuit we discussed in the previous chapter. You believe your emotions are the truth. If you feel disrespected, you assume the other person is being disrespectful. If you feel anxious, you assume the situation is dangerous. People at level 1 are incredibly easy to manipulate because their remote control is sitting on the table for anyone to grab. They're predictable. If I know what triggers you, I can dictate your mood for the entire day. The hallmark of level 1 is regret. You spend a significant portion of your life apologizing for things you said when you were emotional, or cleaning up the messes made by your impulsive decisions. You feel like a boat without a rudder, tossed around by the waves of the world. Level 2. Conscious reactivity, the observer of the storm. At level 2, you have developed a degree of self-awareness, but you haven't yet developed self-control. When a trigger happens, you actually notice it. You feel the heat rising in your chest. You hear the aggressive thought forming in your mind. You think to yourself, I know I shouldn't say this. I know I'm overreacting. And then you do it anyway. You are consciously watching yourself fail in real time.
While this feels frustrating, it is actually a sign of massive progress. It means the CEO of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, is finally starting to wake up. It is beginning to observe the amygdala's hijack, even if it isn't strong enough to stop it yet. The gap between stimulus and response has opened up by a fraction of a second.
At level 2, you are no longer a victim, you are a student. You are beginning to realize that your emotions and your identity are two separate things. You are the sky, the emotion is just a very loud, very dark cloud passing through. Level 3, conscious response, the master of the pause. This is the level where true power begins. At level 3, the pause becomes your default setting. When a stimulus hits, a rude email, a stressful deadline, or a personal insult, you feel the emotional surge, but you do not let it reach your muscles or your vocal cords. You have learned to sit with the discomfort of an unprocessed emotion. Instead of reacting to get rid of the feeling, you observe the feeling until the chemical surge, the cortisol and adrenaline, begins to dissipate. You use this time to ask strategic questions. Is this worth my energy? What is my long-term goal in this interaction? How would the person I want to become handle this? At level 3, you're choosing your actions based on your values, not your impulses. You may still feel angry, but you respond with professional coldness or calculated silence. You may feel terrified, but you walk onto the stage anyway. This is the level of high emotional intelligence. People start to describe you as unshakable or composed. You have reclaimed your remote control. You are no longer providing people with the payoff they expect when they try to trigger you. Level 4, emotional alchemy, the unshakable master. Level 4 is the apex of human emotional development. At this stage, the trigger happens, but the internal surge itself is transformed. You have rewired your brain so deeply through the practice of non-reaction that things that used to devastate you now barely register as a blip on your radar. This isn't about being a robot, it's about perspective. At level 4, you have such a high degree of internal sovereignty that you view other people's attempts to trigger you with a sense of detached curiosity or even compassion. When someone screams at you, you don't feel the need to defend yourself because your self-worth is not tied to their opinion. You see their anger as a reflection of their internal pain, not a comment on your reality. At level 4, you can perform emotional alchemy, taking the energy of a negative situation and instantly converting it into something productive. You take the sting of a failure and turn it into the hunger for a new strategy. You take the heat of an insult and turn it into a humorous observation. You aren't just not reacting, you are literally playing a different game than everyone else. This is the level of world-class leaders, elite athletes, and spiritual masters. You have reached a state of equanimity. The roadmap: how to move up the levels. Moving from level 1 to level 4 is not about trying harder, it is about training. 1. To move from level 1 to level 2, you must start labeling. In the middle of an emotion, simply say to yourself, I am experiencing the feeling of anger. This small linguistic shift creates distance. 2. To move from level 2 to level 3, you must master the physiological pause. When triggered, you must physically change your state. Take 3 deep breaths, walk out of the room, or count to 10. You are waiting for the 12 millisecond brain to hand the keys back to the 500 millisecond brain. 3. To move from level 3 to level 4, you must practice reframing. You must constantly challenge the narrative your brain creates about external events until your default interpretation is one of calm and logic. Chapter 4. The S.T.O.P. Method. Instant calm in 60 seconds. In the previous chapters, we explored the biological hijack and the levels of emotional development. You now understand that your brain is a battlefield between the fast, primitive amygdala and the slow, logical prefrontal cortex. But understanding the problem is not the same as having a solution. When you are in the heat of the moment, when your pulse is racing, your face is flushing, and you feel that familiar urge to lash out or shut down, you don't need a lecture on neuroscience. You need a tool. You need an emergency brake. This chapter is dedicated to the S.T.O.P method. It is a 4-step psychological intervention designed to bridge the gap between stimulus and response. It takes less than 60 seconds to perform, but it can save you years of regret. Why you need a protocol. Willpower is a finite resource. When you are emotionally triggered, your willpower is at its lowest because your brain is redirecting energy towards survival. If you rely on trying to stay calm, you will fail. Instead, you must rely on a protocol. A protocol is a pre-planned set of actions that you trigger the moment you realize you are compromised. Think of the S.T.O.P method as an operating system update for your brain. It forces the CEO of your mind back into the driver's seat by manually overriding the chemical surge of cortisol and adrenaline. Stop. The first step is the most literal. You must physically and mentally stop. The moment you feel an emotional trigger, whether it's a stinging comment, a stressful notification, or a surge of anxiety, you must freeze. Do not type another word. Do not speak another sentence. If you are in the middle of a heated conversation, excuse yourself for a moment. If you are looking at your phone, put it face down. By stopping your physical movement, you send a powerful signal to your amygdala. The emergency is over. Physical stillness helps de-escalate the fight impulse. You are creating a circuit breaker in the 12-millisecond loop of reactivity. Take a breath. Once you have stopped, you must address your biology. As we learned, an emotional reaction is a physical event. Your heart rate is up, and your breathing is shallow. You cannot think clearly if your body thinks it is dying. The most effective way to hack your nervous system is through box breathing. This is a technique used by Navy SEALs and elite athletes to maintain arousal control in high-stress environments. How to do it? 1. Inhale slowly through your nose for a count of 4. 2. Hold that breath for a count of 4. 3. Exhale completely through your mouth for a count of 4. 4. Hold the empty state for a count of 4. Repeat this twice. The hold phases are crucial because they trigger the vagus nerve, which activates the parasympathetic nervous system, your body's rest and digest mode. You are literally telling your brain, "We are safe." Observe. Now that your body is beginning to stabilize, it's time for the CEO to start gathering data. In the observe phase, you become an objective reporter of your own experience. You shift from being the emotion to watching the emotion. Ask yourself 3 specific questions. 1. What am I feeling in my body? For example, I feel tightness in my chest and heat in my face. 2. What is the name of this emotion? For example, this is frustration or this is insecurity. Labeling the emotion moves the activity from the emotional amygdala to the linguistic centers of the prefrontal cortex. 3. What is the story I'm telling myself? For example, the story I'm telling myself is that this person doesn't respect me. Separating the fact, the person said X, from the story, they don't respect me, is the hallmark of high emotional intelligence. Observation creates the distance necessary for logic to return. Proceed. Only after you have stopped, breathed, and observed should you take action. In the proceed phase, you ask one final clarifying question. How do I want to respond when calm? Notice that this is different from asking, what do I want to do right now? Right now, you might want to scream, but the person you want to become, the version of you that is a leader, a loving partner, or a calm professional, wants to reach a goal.
Maybe the best way to proceed is to stay silent. Maybe it's to ask a clarifying question. Maybe it's to walk away entirely. By the time you reach this step, the 12-millisecond urge has passed. You are no longer reacting. You are responding. The power of the 60-second delay. The S.T.O.P method works because it respects the 90-second rule discovered by neuroanatomist Dr. Jill Bolt Taylor. She found that when a person has a reaction to something in their environment, there's a 90-second chemical process that happens. Any emotional response beyond those 90 seconds is the person choosing to stay in that emotional loop. If you can use the S.T.O.P method to bridge those first 60 to 90 seconds, you have successfully starved the emotion of its fuel. You have prevented the spark from becoming a wildfire. Real-world application, the email trap. Imagine you receive an email from a client or supervisor that feels unfair, aggressive, or dismissive. Your level 1 instinct is to set the record straight immediately. Your fingers hover over the keyboard, ready to fire back a defensive masterpiece. Use S.T.O.P. S. Hands off the keyboard. Close the laptop lid. T. 4 seconds in, 4 seconds hold, 4 seconds out, 4 seconds hold. Feel your shoulders drop. O. Observe the ego wanting to be right. Acknowledge that you feel threatened. Realize the story is that your job is at risk, while the fact is just a poorly worded email. P. Proceed. Decide to wait until tomorrow morning to reply, or draft a professional, brief response that addresses only the facts. By the time you reply, you are the one in control. You haven't handed over your remote control to a digital notification. Practice makes permanent. You cannot learn the S.T.O.P method during a crisis any more than you can learn to swim while you are drowning. You must practice this during low-stakes moments. Practice it when you're standing in a long line at the grocery store. Practice it when a website is loading slowly. Practice it when you can't find your keys. By practicing in the small moments, you build the neural muscle memory required to use it when your world feels like it's falling apart. Chapter 5. Stop Overthinking, Advanced Mental Reframing Techniques. In the previous chapters, we focused on the external reaction, the words you say, and the actions you take in the heat of the moment. But for many of us, the most exhausting battle isn't fought out loud. It is fought in the silent, echoing chambers of the mind. This is the internal reaction, better known as overthinking. Overthinking is the process of taking a single emotional spark and fanning it into a wildfire of what-ifs, if-onlys, and worst-case scenarios. If reactivity is a sprint, overthinking is a marathon that never ends. It is a loop of mental chatter that keeps you awake at 3 a.m., replaying a conversation from 3 years ago, or worrying about a meeting 3 weeks away. In this chapter, we will use the core principles of cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, to dismantle these loops and reclaim your mental clarity. The anatomy of a thought spiral. When you're overthinking, the amygdala remains in a state of high alert long after the initial threat has passed. Because your brain is designed to solve problems, it begins to ruminate. It searches for every possible thing that could go wrong so that it can feel prepared. However, you cannot solve a problem with the same level of consciousness that created it. When you're overthinking, you aren't actually problem-solving, you're worrying. Problem-solving leads to an action plan. Worrying leads to more worry. This cycle creates mental fog, making even the simplest decisions feel paralyzing. The 3 pillars of mental reframing. To stop the spiral, you must change the way you process information. This is called cognitive reframing. It is the act of identifying a distorted thought and intentionally replacing it with a more balanced, logical perspective. Here are the 3 most powerful techniques to master your internal reaction. 1. Labeling the distortion. Most of our overthinking is fueled by cognitive distortions, irrational thought patterns that feel true but have no basis in reality. To stop overthinking, you must become a detective of your own mind. Catastrophizing, taking a small mistake and assuming it will lead to total ruin. I made a typo in that report. I'm going to get fired, lose my house, and end up on the street. Mind reading. assuming you know what others are thinking. They didn't text back immediately, they must be angry with me. All or nothing thinking, seeing things in black and white. If I don't get this perfect, I'm a total failure. When you notice a spiral starting, stop and say, I am catastrophizing right now. Labeling the distortion creates a cognitive distance. It reminds you that the thought is a product of your brain's anxiety, not a reflection of objective truth. 2. The courtroom technique. When an overthinking loop takes hold, your brain acts as a prosecutor, presenting all the evidence for why you should be worried. To break the loop, you must play the role of the defense attorney. Take the thought that is bothering you and put it on trial. Ask yourself, what is the evidence that this thought is true? Stick to cold, hard facts, not feelings. What is the evidence that this thought is false? Look for past successes or alternative explanations. If a friend came to me with this exact same worry, what would I tell them? We are almost always more logical and compassionate with others than we are with ourselves. By forcing yourself to look for evidence, you move the activity from the emotional centers of the brain back to the prefrontal cortex. You are starving the overthinking loop of its emotional fuel. 3. Shifting from why to how. One of the biggest traps in overthinking is the why trap. Why did I say that? Why am I like this? Why do they treat me this way? Why questions are backward-looking and often lead to shame and circular thinking. To gain mental clarity, you must shift to how or what questions. Instead of why did I mess up that presentation, ask how can I prepare differently for the next one. Instead of why am I so anxious, ask what is one small action I can take right now to feel more in control. How and what questions are action-oriented. They force the brain to look for a solution rather than wallowing in the problem. The power of mental containment. Sometimes your brain simply isn't ready to let go of a worry. In these cases, use scheduled worry time. Give yourself 10 minutes at 4 p.m. to think about every what-if scenario. Write them all down. When the 10 minutes are up, tell your brain, I have addressed these concerns. We are done for today. If a worry pops up at 10 p.m., tell yourself that's on the list for tomorrow's worry time. This gives your brain the security it craves without allowing the overthinking to bleed into your entire day. Reclaiming your mental energy. Every minute you spend overthinking is a minute you're not spending on your goals, your passions, or your peace. Your mental energy is a finite resource. When you learn to stop the internal reaction, you don't just feel better, you become more effective. You see opportunities where you once saw obstacles. Reframing is a skill. The first few times you try to challenge your thoughts, your brain will fight back. It will want to stay in the familiar comfort of the spiral. But with every thought you reframe, you are rewiring your neural pathways. You are training yourself to see the world as it is, rather than as your anxiety fears it might be. Chapter 6. The Patience Reservoir. Building Long-Term Emotional Resilience. In the previous chapters, we discussed the emergency tools, how to stop a hijack in progress, and how to reframe your thoughts in the heat of the moment. But if you only focus on crisis management, you are playing a defensive game. To truly master the power of not reacting, you must go on the offensive. You must build what I call your patience reservoir.
Imagine your emotional capacity as a literal water tank. Every time you face a stressor, a crying child, a passive-aggressive comment, a looming deadline, or a lack of sleep, a drain at the bottom of the tank opens. If your tank is full, you can handle those drains with ease. You remain calm, logical, and composed. But if your tank is already near empty, the smallest drop in water level will leave you running on empty. This is when you snap. This is when the amygdala takes over. Emotional mastery is not just about mental willpower, it is about resource management. In this chapter, we will explore how your physical and mental health dictate your baseline of calm and how to build a reservoir so deep that the world's chaos can no longer drain you. The biological foundation of calm.
We like to think of our minds as separate from our bodies, but the CEO of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, is a biological organ. It requires energy to function. When you're physically depleted, your brain's ability to regulate emotion is the first thing to go. If you are sleep-deprived, your amygdala becomes nearly 60% more reactive to negative stimuli. This is why everything feels like an emergency when you haven't slept. Your brain literally loses its ability to put events into perspective. Similarly, when your blood sugar is low or you are dehydrated, your brain perceives a state of threat, making you more likely to interpret a neutral comment as a personal attack. Building mental toughness begins with biological maintenance. You cannot build a stoic mind on a broken foundation. To increase your baseline of calm, you must treat your sleep, nutrition, and hydration as emotional performance enhancers. They aren't just for your body, they are for your character. The Stoic concept of pre-mortem calm. Ancient Stoic philosophers like Seneca and Marcus Aurelius practiced a technique called premeditatio malorum, or the premeditation of evils. This is the mental practice of visualizing potential setbacks before they happen. Most people believe that positive thinking is the key to happiness, but positive thinking actually makes you more reactive. If you expect everything to go perfectly, you are emotionally devastated when the inevitable obstacle appears. The Stoic, however, builds resilience by expecting the obstacle. By spending 5 minutes each morning visualizing the things that could go wrong, a traffic jam, a rude client, a technological failure, you preload your reaction. You decide, in the safety of your morning quiet, how the person you want to become will handle those moments. When the obstacle eventually arrives, it doesn't catch you off guard. Your brain recognizes it. Ah, I planned for this. This turns a potential hijack into a simple execution of your pre-planned strategy. Expanding the reservoir through discomfort. Resilience is a muscle, and like any muscle, it only grows when it is placed under stress. If you live a life of total comfort, your patience reservoir will remain shallow. This is why many people who have it all are often the most reactive. Their tolerance for discomfort is non-existent. To build long-term resilience, you must intentionally seek out micro-discomforts. This is the practice of voluntary hardship. Cold exposure. Taking a 60-second cold shower forces you to stay calm while your body screams to react. Delayed gratification. Choosing to wait 10 minutes before checking your phone or eating a snack when you feel the urge. Physical training. Pushing through the last 2 minutes of a workout when your mind wants to quit. Every time you choose to endure a small discomfort without complaining or reacting, you are pouring water into your reservoir. You are proving to your brain that discomfort is not the same as danger. The drain audit. Protecting your energy. Building the reservoir is half the battle. You must also plug the leaks. Many of us are leaking emotional energy into things that don't matter. This is the dichotomy of control. The Stoic master knows that there are only 2 categories in life: things you can control and things you cannot. 1. Things you can control: your thoughts, your actions, your words, and your intentions. 2. Things you cannot control: the weather, the economy, other people's opinions, and the past. Most people spend 90% of their emotional energy reacting to things in the second category. They get angry at the news, frustrated by the traffic, and hurt by the opinions of strangers online. Every time you react to something you cannot control, you are opening a massive drain in your reservoir. Mental toughness is the discipline of refusing to give your emotional currency to things that offer no return on investment. Before you let a situation upset you, ask, do I have any control over the outcome of this situation? If the answer is no, then reacting is a waste of your life force. Save your water for the fires you can actually put out. The power of the morning buffer. Your reservoir is usually at its highest level when you wake up. However, most people immediately drain it by checking their email or social media within seconds of opening their eyes. You are starting your day in a reactive state, letting the world's priorities dictate your mood. To build long-term resilience, you must create a morning buffer. This is a 30 to 60-minute window where you are the master of your environment. No screens, no news, no external input. Use this time for meditation, movement, or the pre-mortem visualization we discussed. This solidifies your baseline of calm so that when you finally step out into the world, your tank is overflowing. Chapter 7. Rewiring the Brain, the Science of Emotional Transformation. One of the most dangerous lies we tell ourselves is, "This is just the way I am." We treat our personality traits, our hair-trigger temper, our tendency to overthink, or our chronic anxiety as if they were written in stone or coded unchangeably into our DNA. We resign ourselves to a life of reactivity because we believe our brains are static hardware that cannot be upgraded. Science has proven that this is false. Thanks to the phenomenon known as neuroplasticity, we now know that the brain is not a porcelain mace, it's a ball of wet clay. It is constantly being reshaped, rewired, and restructured by your thoughts, your environment, and most importantly, your habitual responses. In this chapter, we are going to explore the hard science of emotional transformation. I want to show you that calmness is not a lucky personality trait. It is a physical muscle that you can grow. The law of Hebbian learning. Fire together, wire together. In the 1940s, psychologist Hebb proposed a theory that has become a cornerstone of neuroscience. Neurons that fire together, wire together. Every time you have a thought or a reaction, a specific cluster of neurons in your brain communicates via electrical impulses. If you react with anger every time you receive a critical email, you are reinforcing a specific neural pathway. Think of these pathways like trails in a forest. The first time you react, you are pushing through dense brush. It's difficult. But the 100th time you react, that trail has become a paved highway. Your brain, in an effort to be efficient, will always choose the path of least resistance. This is why reactivity feels automatic. It's because you've paved a high-speed road for your anger to travel on. But the reverse is also true. When you choose not to react, when you use the S.T.O.P method or the pause, you are essentially refusing to drive down the old highway. Instead, you are beginning to carve out a new path, the path of calm. At first, this new trail is overgrown and difficult to navigate, but every time you repeat the choice, the old anger highway begins to crack and crumble from disuse, while the calm path becomes smoother and faster. This is the physical reality of changing a habit.
The shrinking amygdala and the growing CEO. Perhaps the most exciting discovery in the science of emotional mastery is that you can actually change the physical size of the structures in your brain. In a landmark study, researchers at Harvard University took a group of people who had never practiced mindfulness and put them through an 8-week program of daily meditation and emotional regulation exercises. At the end of the 2 months, MRI scans revealed a shocking physical transformation. First, the amygdala, the brain's fear and alarm center, had physically shrunk. It had become less dense, meaning it was less likely to trigger a hijack response. Second, the prefrontal cortex, the CEO of the brain, responsible for logic, self-control, and decision-making, had become thicker and more robust. By practicing non-reaction, these individuals had literally depowered their panic button and upgraded their internal leadership. They hadn't just learned a trick, they had built a different brain. This is the muscle of calmness.
When you stay calm in a difficult situation, you aren't just getting through the day, you are performing a biological workout that makes you stronger for the next challenge. Meditation, the gym for brain health. If you want to grow your biceps, you go to the gym and lift weights. If you want to grow your prefrontal cortex, you sit in silence and practice mindfulness meditation. Many people view meditation as a mystical or spiritual practice, but from a neurological perspective, it is simply resistance training for the mind. When you meditate, you are practicing the act of noticing a thought or an emotion and choosing not to engage with it. You are practicing the strategic pause over and over again in a controlled environment. When you are sitting on your cushion and your mind wanders to a stressful work project and you gently pull your focus back to your breath, you have just completed one rep of emotional control. Do this for 10 minutes a day and you are completing hundreds of reps. Over time, this training builds gray matter density. It creates a brain that is naturally less reactive, even when you're not meditating. This is why elite performers, from CEOs to special forces, use meditation. It isn't for relaxation, it's for brain optimization. The dopamine trap of reactivity. To rewire your brain, you must also understand the reward system. Why is it so hard to stop reacting? Because the brain often gets a hit of dopamine when we lash out. When you tell someone off or win an argument through aggression, your brain perceives this as a social victory. It releases dopamine, a feel-good chemical that reinforces the behavior. You feel a temporary surge of power. This makes reactivity addictive. You become a dopamine junkie for conflict. To break this addiction, you must create a new reward system. You must begin to take pleasure in your restraint. Start celebrating the moments where you didn't say the biting comment. Feel the win in the fact that someone tried to trigger you and failed. When you shift the reward from the outburst to the mastery, your brain begins to crave the calm instead of the chaos. Small wins and neural momentum. Rewiring doesn't happen in one giant leap. It happens through neural momentum. If you try to stay perfectly calm during a major life crisis on day one, you will likely fail. The weight is too heavy. Instead, look for micro-mastery opportunities. The next time you're stuck in a slow-moving line, don't check your phone. Sit with the boredom. The next time someone makes a mild joke at your expense, smile and let it go. The next time you receive a mildly annoying text, wait 30 minutes to reply. These small wins act as proof of concept for your brain. They prove that you are in control. Each small win builds the neural density required to handle the big stressors later. Chapter 8. Calm under pressure. Mastering high-stakes situations. There is a specific kind of silence that exists at the center of the storm. In the world of high performance, whether it's a surgeon in a trauma bay, a pilot facing engine failure, or an executive navigating a hostile takeover, success is not determined by who is the smartest or the most talented. It is determined who can maintain their mental focus when the stakes are at their highest. Most people can be calm when life is easy. It's easy to be a Zen master on a beach. But the true test of your emotional sovereignty is how you behave when everything is going wrong. Can you keep your voice steady when you are being unfairly accused? Can you keep your mind clear when you've just lost a major client? This chapter is about the tactical calm, the ability to perform under pressure and stay cool when everyone else is losing their heads. The psychology of peak performance. Under extreme pressure, the human brain tends to do one of two things. It either fragments or it funnels. When your brain fragments, you become overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the crisis. You start thinking about the consequences of failure, the judgment of your peers, and the what-ifs of the future. This is how people freeze. However, elite performers learn to funnel. They use the pressure to narrow their focus down to the immediate next logical step. They ignore the storm and focus entirely on the instrument panel. This is known as process focus versus outcome focus. If you focus on the outcome, the fear of losing, you trigger a hijack. If you focus on the process, the next move, you keep the prefrontal cortex engaged. The Arousal Control Toolkit. To stay cool in a crisis, you must manage your biological arousal. When the stakes are high, your body wants to redline, your heart rate climbs, and your fine motor skills begin to degrade. To counter this, you must use biohacks to stay in the flow zone, that sweet spot between boredom and panic. 1. The low, slow voice. One of the most powerful ways to signal calm to your own brain and to the room is through your voice. When we are stressed, our vocal cords tighten and our pitch rises. We speak faster. This signals to everyone around us that we are in flight mode. Practice the commander's voice. Speak slightly slower than usual. Lower your pitch. By manually controlling your voice, you are using a bottom-up neurological hack. Your brain hears your steady voice and concludes, if we are speaking this calmly, we must not be in danger. 2. The horizon gaze. Under pressure, our vision tends to tunnel. We stare intensely at the source of the stress. This physical tightening reinforces the internal panic. To break this, intentionally soften your gaze. Look at the big picture of the room. This panoramic vision is linked to the parasympathetic nervous system. It tells your brain to move out of the high alert state and back into a strategic state. 3. The OODA loop, decision-making in the storm. In the 1950s, military strategist John Boyd developed the OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, and act. This is the gold standard for staying calm in high-stakes environments. Observe, collect raw data. What is actually happening right now, not what you feel is happening. Orient, put the data in context. Why is this happening? What are the hidden traps? Decide, choose the best path among the available options. Act, execute the decision with total commitment. The secret to staying calm in a crisis is to keep your OODA loop cycling faster than the crisis itself. When you have a system for making decisions, you don't have time to be afraid. You aren't reacting to the chaos, you are processing it. Case study: the miracle on the Hudson. On January 15, 2009, Captain Chesley Sullinger's plane lost both engines over New York. He had less than 3 minutes to decide the fate of 155 people. If Sully had reacted emotionally, he would have panicked at the impossibility of the situation. Instead, he maintained a tactical silence. On the cockpit voice recordings, his voice is eerily calm. He didn't waste energy on fear or why me questions. He funneled his focus. He observed the altitude, oriented to the nearest landing spots, decided that the river was his only option, and acted with precision.
Sully later said that he felt the physical symptoms of a hijack. His heart was racing and his blood pressure spiked. But he chose to treat those sensations as fuel for his focus rather than signals for his fear. This is the ultimate goal of emotional mastery. Pressure is a privilege. It means you are in a position where your actions matter. Developing your crisis protocol. You should not wait for a crisis to decide how you will handle one. You need a pre-written script for high-stakes moments. Next time you are in a high-pressure situation, follow this script. 1. Acknowledge the surge. Say to yourself, I feel the adrenaline. This is my body preparing me for a challenge. Reframing. 2. The tactical reset. Take one sigh breath, a deep inhale followed by a long, audible exhale. 3. Identify the next right move. Ignore the 50 steps that come after. What is the one thing that needs to happen in the next 60 seconds? 4. Execute with presence. Do that one thing with your full attention. Performance under pressure is a habit.
Staying cool in a crisis is not a gift, it is a habit built in the small moments. If you can't stay calm when you lose your car keys, you won't stay calm when you lose $1 million deal. Every small storm in your life is a training ground. When the coffee spills, when the internet goes out, or when someone is rude to you in the elevator, that is your rehearsal. If you can keep your voice steady and your mind clear in those moments, you are preloading the calm you will need when the real crisis arrives. Chapter 9. Emotional Alchemy, Turning Anger and Fear into Fuel. Up to this point, we have focused on the discipline of the pause. We have discussed how to stop the explosion, how to breathe through the hijack, and how to build a reservoir of patience. For many, this is where the journey ends, at the level of peaceful coexistence with their feelings. But there is a higher level of mastery that goes beyond mere management. In the ancient world, alchemists sought to turn lead into gold. In the modern world of emotional intelligence, we practice emotional alchemy. This is the art of taking heavy emotions like anger, fear, and frustration, emotions that usually lead to self-destruction, and transmuting them into a high-octane fuel for achievement. The goal is no longer just to not react. The goal is to take the massive amount of energy generated by an emotional surge and redirect it toward your highest goals. When you master this, you stop being afraid of negative emotions because you realize they are actually gifts of raw energy. The energy of emotion. The word emotion comes from the Latin emovere, which literally means to move out. Emotions are energy in motion. When you feel a surge of anger or a spike of fear, your body is producing real physical energy. Your heart is pumping faster, your blood is oxygenated, and your brain is hyper-alert. Most people use this energy to explode, reaction, or they try to bottle it up, suppression. Both are a waste. Reaction burns the energy in a way that destroys your environment. Suppression keeps the energy inside, where it turns into stress, anxiety, and eventual burnout. Emotional alchemy is the third path, channeling. If you were a power plant and a massive storm hit, you wouldn't just let the lightning strike the building and burn it down. You would capture that electricity and send it into the grid to light up a city. Transmuting anger into ambition. Anger is perhaps the most potent lead in our emotional toolkit. Biologically, anger is a signal that a boundary has been crossed or an injustice has occurred. It is a high arousal state designed to give you the strength to fight. When you are angry at a competitor, a boss who overlooked you, or even at your own past failures, you have a choice. You can lash out and prove everyone right about your lack of control, or you can use that heat to fuel your grind. Some of the greatest athletes and entrepreneurs in history were not fueled by peace and love. They were fueled by a chip on their shoulder. Michael Jordan famously took every slight, real or imagined, and turned it into a practice session that lasted until midnight. He didn't react to his critics by arguing with them. He reacted by becoming so good that they became irrelevant. The alchemy of anger. 1. Acknowledge the heat. I am feeling a massive surge of anger. 2. Refuse the outburst. I will not waste this energy on a 10-second shout. 3. Redirect the flow. Take that physical tension and put it into a high-intensity workout, a deep work session, or a difficult project you've been procrastinating on. Use the edge of the anger to push through the resistance that normally stops you. Transmuting fear into focus. Fear is often seen as a weakness, but in the hands of a master, fear is a superpower. Fear is your body's way of saying, pay attention, the stakes are high. The physiological symptoms of fear, pacing, racing heart, sweaty palms, are nearly identical to the symptoms of excitement. The only difference is the story your brain tells you. A level 1 person feels the surge and says, I'm afraid, I should run. An emotional alchemist feels the surge and says, I am prepared, I am focused. This is known in motivational psychology as anxiety reappraisal. Instead of trying to calm down, which is difficult because your body is already in a high arousal state, you simply pivot. Tell yourself, I am excited to perform. This relabels the energy. You use the adrenaline to sharpen your vision and quicken your reflexes. You use the fear to ensure you've double-checked every detail. You are using the lead of anxiety to create the gold of a flawless performance. The problem with suppression. Many people mistake not reacting for not feeling. They try to become a robot. This is a dangerous mistake. When you suppress an emotion, you aren't getting rid of the energy, you're just burying it. Like a pressure cooker with no valve, eventually you will blow. The emotional alchemist does not suppress, they validate and redirect. They say, it is perfectly logical that I feel frustrated right now. This situation is difficult. Now, how can I use this frustration to find a creative solution that I would have been too lazy to find if I were comfortable? Comfort is the enemy of growth. Negative emotions are the friction that creates fire. If you are always calm in the sense of being passive, you will never have the drive to change the world. You need the darker emotions to provide the contrast and the push required for greatness. Practicing the pivot. To become an alchemist, you must practice the pivot in low-stakes moments. If you're frustrated by a long commute, don't complain. Use that annoyed energy to listen to an educational podcast or plan your most important task for the day with intense clarity. If you feel rejected by a friend, use that lonely energy to invest in yourself, go to the gym, read a book, or master a new skill. If you're feeling less than because of social media, use that envy as a map. It is telling you what you actually want. Use the sting of envy to fuel the discipline required to go get it. The unstoppable mindset. When you master emotional alchemy, you become truly unstoppable. Why? Because the world can no longer hurt you. If the world gives you success, you use it for momentum. If the world gives you failure, you use the pain to fuel your comeback. If people insult you, you use the anger to sharpen your excellence. You stop avoiding bad days because you know that a bad day is just a day with more raw fuel for your furnace. You become like a fire that grows stronger when the wind blows against it.
Chapter 10. Unshakable Confidence, the Identity of a Stoic Master. Most people carry a version of confidence that is extremely fragile. It is a conditional confidence. It depends entirely on things going well. If they get the promotion, they feel confident. If their partner praises them, they feel strong. If the world reflects back an image of success, they stand tall. But the moment the external world shifts, the moment they face criticism, rejection, or a simple bad day, that confidence evaporates. This is not confidence. It is an emotional loan that the world can call in at any time. True confidence, unshakable confidence, is not the belief that you will succeed in everything you do. It's the quiet, internal certainty that you will be okay regardless of what happens. It is the shift from seeking external validation to possessing internal sovereignty. In this chapter, we are going to explore the identity of the Stoic Master and how you can become fundamentally untouchable. The trap of external validation. The reason most of us are so reactive is that we have outsourced our self-esteem. We have given the world the keys to our house and told it to decorate as it pleases. When someone insults us, we react because we believe their words have the power to change our value. When we overthink a social interaction, it's because we are terrified that we've lost points in the eyes of others. The Stoic Master realizes a fundamental truth. Your value is not a collective decision. It is not something that can be voted on. People can take your property, they can take your status, and they can even take your physical freedom, but they cannot take your character unless you hand it to them.
Confidence is the byproduct of knowing that your remote control is firmly in your own hand. When you stop needing the world to tell you that you are good, you stop being afraid of the world telling you that you are bad. This is the birth of the untouchable identity. You are no longer a leaf blown by the wind. You are the mountain the wind blows against. Shifting your identity from reactor to commander. To reach this level of mastery, you must undergo an identity shift. You must stop identifying as a person who is trying to be calm and start identifying as a person who is the calm. Think about your current self-narrative. Do you tell yourself, "I'm just a hothead," or "I've always been an overthinker"? These labels are identity anchors. They keep you tethered to level 1 and level 2 reactivity. Every time you say, "That's just how I am," you are giving your amygdala a permission slip to hijack you. The Stoic master adopts a new method. Their identity is built on non-attachment. They see themselves as the observer of their life. When a difficult emotion arises, they don't say, "I am angry." They say, "There is anger passing through me." This subtle linguistic shift is the foundation of inner strength. By separating yourself from your feelings, you create a fortress that no emotion can breach. You become the commander of the ship, observing the waves, but not becoming the water. The source of inner strength, the internal scorecard. Warren Buffett, one of the most successful investors in history, often talks about the internal scorecard. He asks, "Would you rather be the world's greatest lover, but have everyone think you're the world's worst, or the world's worst lover, but have everyone think you're the world's greatest?" If you choose the latter, you are a slave to external validation. If you choose the former, you have an internal scorecard. Unshakable confidence comes from living according to your own internal standards. When you know you acted with integrity, when you know you used your S.T.O.P method, and when you know you chose logic over impulse, you have won. It doesn't matter if the other person won the argument or if the world didn't applaud your restraint. You know you maintained your sovereignty. This internal victory builds a confidence momentum that is far more powerful than any external praise. You start to trust yourself, and when you truly trust yourself, you become a force of nature. Building the mental fortress. In his Meditations, Marcus Aurelius wrote about the inner citadel. He believed that the mind could be turned into a fortress that no external force could conquer. How do you build this citadel? Through the evidence of restraint. Every time you receive a rude comment and choose to smile rather than fire back, feel a surge of anxiety and choose to breathe rather than overthink, face a failure and choose to analyze rather than lament, you are adding a brick to your fortress. Confidence isn't built through affirmations or standing in front of a mirror telling yourself you're great. Confidence is built through competence, specifically the competence of self-regulation. When you have 1,000 receipts of times you stayed calm when you should have snapped, you no longer hope you are strong, you know you are. Becoming untouchable, the power of low stakes. To become untouchable, you must practice amor fati, the love of fate. This is the ultimate Stoic stage, where you don't just tolerate the things that try to trigger you, you welcome them as training. If someone is rude to you, the level 1 person thinks, "How dare they?" The Stoic master thinks, "Thank you for this opportunity to practice my non-reaction. You are the weight I am using to grow my mental muscle today." When you view the world's chaos as your personal gymnasium, you become invincible. Why? Because the world cannot longer hurt you, it can only train you. An insult becomes a test of your patience. A delay becomes a test of your equanimity. A loss becomes a test of your resilience. The result, a presence of power. When you stop needing validation and start relying on your internal scorecard, your physical presence changes. Your movements become more deliberate. Your eye contact becomes steadier. Your voice loses the neediness of someone who wants to be liked. This is the iron presence. People are naturally drawn to those who are emotionally centered because in a world of reactive, frantic people, the person who is untouchable is the only one who can be trusted. You become the anchor for everyone else. Chapter 11. The Gray Rock Method. Strategic Non-Reaction in Relationships. In the previous chapters, we focused on mastering the self. We looked at the biology of the brain and the internal tools needed to maintain calm. But life does not happen in a vacuum. We live in a world populated by other people, some of whom are not interested in your peace. In fact, there are individuals who view your emotional reactivity as a target. These are the toxic triggers, the narcissists, the emotional vampires, and the workplace bullies who thrive on drama and control. To these people, your reaction is their supply. When you get angry, when you cry, or when you frantically try to defend your character, you are giving them exactly what they want. You are feeding their need for significance and control. In this chapter, we are going to explore the most powerful defensive strategy in the world of high-conflict relationships, the Gray Rock Method. This is the art of becoming so uninteresting, so unreactive, and so boring that the toxic person has no choice but to go look for their drama somewhere else. The psychology of the emotional predator. To understand why the Gray Rock Method works, you must understand the motivation of the person trying to trigger you. Whether it's a toxic ex-partner, a toxic family member, or a manipulative colleague, their goal is usually provocation. They don't want a logical conversation. They don't want to solve the problem. They want to see a flicker of emotion in you. If they can make you lose your cool, they win. Why? Because now the conversation is no longer about their bad behavior. It's about your crazy reaction. By triggering you, they shift the power dynamic. They become the logical observer of your emotional outburst.
Every time you engage with their bait, you are handing them the remote control to your life. You are telling them, if you push this button, I will dance for you. The Gray Rock Method is about cutting those wires forever. What is the Gray Rock Method? The name says it all. If you look at a gray rock on the ground, what do you feel? Nothing. You don't hate the rock. You don't love the rock. You simply don't notice the rock. It provides no stimulation, no feedback, and no energy. When you gray rock someone, you adopt the persona of that stone. You become intentionally boring. You offer no personal information, no emotional responses, and no opinions that could be used as leverage. You are physically present, but emotionally absent. You are untouchable because you have removed everything that they can grab onto. The rules of strategic non-reaction. To execute this method correctly, you must adhere to 4 core rules. These rules are designed to protect your boundaries while starving the toxic person of their emotional payoff. 1. The monosyllabic response. When a toxic person tries to bait you with a leading question or an insult, do not defend yourself. Defense is a reaction. Instead, give brief, non-committal answers. Okay. I see. Maybe. I'll think about that. By keeping your answers short and devoid of emotion, you give them nothing to hook into. You are a conversational dead end. 2. The information blackout. Toxic people use your dreams, your fears, and your daily activities as weapons. In the gray rock state, you stop sharing. If they ask how your day was, the answer is always fine or productive. If they ask about your plans, the answer is nothing special. You are not being rude, you are being transparently boring.
When you stop providing the data of your life, they lose the ability to manipulate your future. 3. No jade. Justify, argue, defend, explain. This is the most important acronym in relationship boundaries. When someone is trying to trigger you, your level 1 instinct is to jade. You want to explain why they are wrong. You want to defend your reputation. Stop. A toxic person does not care about your explanation. They only care that they've forced you into a defensive posture. The moment you start jading, you have lost. The gray rock master never explains. They simply state a boundary or offer a neutral, and then they move on. The internal observation technique. While you are being a gray rock on the outside, you must be a scientist on the inside. When the toxic person is rampaging or trying to bait you, observe them as if they were a specimen in a lab. Look at how they are using that specific tone to try and elicit guilt. Notice how they are shifting the blame to avoid accountability. By observing their tactics objectively, you stay in your prefrontal cortex. You aren't hurting, you are studying. This mental distance is your shield. The extinction burst. What to expect. When you first start using the gray rock method, things will likely get worse before they get better. This is what psychologists call an extinction burst. Imagine a person who always gets a candy bar from a vending machine by hitting it. One day, the machine stops giving candy. Does the person walk away immediately? No. They hit the machine harder. They kick it. They scream at it. They try every possible way to get that candy bar. When you stop reacting, the toxic person will hit the machine harder. They will escalate the insults, bring up old traumas, or try to love bomb you back into a reaction. You must hold the line. If you break and react during the extinction burst, you are teaching them that they just need to be more toxic to get what they want. If you remain a gray rock, they will eventually realize the machine is broken and move on to a new target. Relationship boundaries as self-respect. Using the gray rock method is not about being mean or passive-aggressive. It is an act of extreme self-respect. It is the realization that your emotional energy is a sacred resource, and you have no obligation to spend it on someone who intends to use it against you. In professional settings, this makes you unfireable in a drama-filled office. In personal settings, it creates the distance necessary for you to heal and eventually exit the toxic dynamic. You are protecting your internal citadel by refusing to let an invader over the walls. Chapter 12. Emotional Leadership: How to Influence and Lead Others. In the previous chapters, we have focused on the internal citadel, the private mastery of your own impulses, biology, and thoughts. But as you ascend the levels of emotional mastery, you will notice a strange and powerful phenomenon. Your internal calm begins to alter the external environment. This is the birth of emotional leadership. In any group, be it a family, a sports team, or a corporate boardroom, there is a subtle but constant process of emotional contagion. Humans are social animals, wired to sync their nervous systems with those around them. We look for cues on how to feel and how to act, especially during times of uncertainty. In this social dynamic, there is a fundamental law of human psychology. The person with the most certainty and the greatest emotional self-control will always influence the group. True leadership is not about a title, a loud voice, or the power to fire people. True leadership is the ability to remain centered when everyone else is spinning out of control. It is the ability to be the emotional thermostat of the room rather than the thermometer. The thermostat versus the thermometer. Most people in a professional or social setting function like thermometers. They simply reflect the temperature of the room. If the boss is stressed, they become stressed. If the client is angry, they become defensive. If the market is panicking, they panic. They are reactive. And because they are reactive, they are followers. An emotional leader functions like a thermostat. They set the temperature. When they walk into a high-tension meeting, they don't sync up with the anxiety. They project a level of calm and logic so profound that the others begin to sync with them. This is social intelligence in its highest form. By refusing to mirror the negativity of others, you force them to either rise to your level of composure or reveal their own lack of discipline. The science of mirror neurons. This isn't just a vibe or a management theory. It is rooted in the biology of mirror neurons. These are specialized brain cells that fire both when we perform an action and when we observe someone else performing that same action. They are the basis for empathy and social learning. When a leader remains calm under pressure, the mirror neurons in their subordinates' brains fire in a way that mimics that calm. You are literally downloading your composure into the minds of your team. Conversely, a reactive leader spreads a virus of anxiety that shuts down the collective prefrontal cortex of the group, leading to poor decisions and low morale. In workplace psychology, this is known as the ripple effect. Your non-reaction doesn't just save you from making a mistake, it provides the psychological safety necessary for everyone else to do their best work. This is why the calmest person in the room is usually the one in charge, regardless of their official rank. Everyone naturally looks to the person who isn't panicking to find out what to do next. Leading through non-reaction. How does an emotional leader handle conflict or high-pressure stakes? They use the power of not reacting as a strategic tool to influence the outcome.
Validating without agreeing. When an employee or a peer comes to you in a state of high emotion, perhaps they are complaining about a project or expressing anger, the reactive response is to either shut them down or get sucked into the drama. The emotional leader uses the strategic pause. They listen. They validate the feeling. I can see you're very frustrated by this, without necessarily agreeing with the conclusion. By staying calm, you prevent the situation from escalating. Your lack of a defensive reaction acts as a buffer that absorbs their emotional energy and allows logic to return to the conversation. The power of low arousal communication. In a crisis, the typical instinct is to move faster and talk louder. An emotional leader does the opposite. They intentionally lower their vocal pitch and slow their tempo. This is a signal of high status. High-status individuals do not rush, they do not fidget, they do not react to every stimuli. By maintaining a low arousal state, you communicate that the situation is under control. This creates a gravity well of confidence. People want to follow you because your presence suggests that you have a plan, even if you are still formulating it. Decision-making as a service. One of the primary roles of a leader is to provide clarity. Reactivity is the enemy of clarity. When you are in an emotional state, your cognitive load is consumed by the hijack. You cannot see the second and third-order consequences of your choices. The emotional leader treats their non-reaction as a service to the team. By holding back their initial impulse, they maintain the executive function required to make the right call. In high-stakes environments, such as a surgical team or a military unit, this is called situational awareness. The moment a leader reacts emotionally, they lose situational awareness. They become focused on the insult or the ego threat rather than the mission. Mastering your emotions allows you to keep your eyes on the board while everyone else is looking at the pieces. Conflict resolution through de-escalation. Every workplace has triggers: the person who gossips, the person who misses deadlines, or the person who challenges authority. A reactive leader plays a constant game of whack-a-mole with these triggers, wasting massive amounts of energy. The emotional leader uses strategic indifference. They don't give the office drama seeker the reaction they crave. Instead, they address the behavior with clinical objectivity. Reaction?
I can't believe you missed that deadline again. Do you even care about this project? Leadership. The deadline was missed. This affects the timeline of the entire team. What is the process fix to ensure this doesn't happen again? Notice the shift. The leader moves the focus from the person, which triggers defensiveness, to the process, which leads to a solution. This is how you lead people to better results without damaging the relationship. Chapter 13. Your Emotional OS. Designing your personal daily routine. We often think of emotional mastery as a dramatic act of willpower, a heroic struggle that takes place in the heat of a crisis. We imagine ourselves standing tall against a wave of anger or resisting a sudden surge of panic. But the truth of the matter is far more practical. You do not rise to the level of your intentions, you fall to the level of your systems. If you have to rely on willpower to stay calm, you have already lost. Willpower is like a phone battery. It starts the day fully charged, but every decision you make, every email you read, and every minor frustration you encounter drains it. By 4 p.m., your battery is in the red. This is why most explosions, relapses, and overthinking spirals happen in the evening. To become truly unshakable, you must stop treating emotional control as a manual task and start treating it as an operating system, OS. You must design a daily routine that automates your composure. You need to create an environment where not reacting is not something you do, but something you are. In this chapter, we will build your personal emotional OS using the science of habit stacking and environmental design. The morning boot sequence, neutralizing the baseline. Most people begin their day in a state of reactive debt. They wake up to a loud, jarring alarm, trigger 1. They immediately grab their phone and check social media or news, flooding their brain with other people's problems and dopamine-seeking outrages, trigger 2. They check their work email and start mentally arguing with a colleague before they've even brushed their teeth, trigger 3. By the time they have their first cup of coffee, their amygdala is already on high alert. Their patience reservoir is already leaking. An emotional OS requires a proactive boot sequence. The first 60 minutes of your day are the system admin phase. Your goal is to keep the amygdala dormant while the prefrontal cortex fully initializes. The OS morning routine. 1. The no-screen sanctuary. Keep your phone in another room until you complete your routine. Do not let the world's chaos enter your mind until your internal citadel is fortified. 2. Somatic grounding. Before your mind starts racing, check in with your body. 5 minutes of stretching or a cold shower, as discussed in Chapter 6, tells your nervous system that you are the master of your physical state. 3. The pre-mortem meditation. Instead of vague, positive vibes, spend 3 minutes visualizing the 3 most likely triggers of your day. See yourself using the S.T.O.P method. By doing this, you are preloading your calm. Habit stacking for mental health. To make emotional mastery permanent, you must attach your new non-reaction skills to habits you already have. This is a concept called habit stacking. You use the neural pathways already established in your brain to carry the new weaker pathways of emotional control. The commute stack. Whenever you hit a red light or a traffic delay, use that as a cue for 1 round of box breathing. Instead of the light being a frustration, it becomes a cue for calm. The door frame stack. Every time you walk through a door to enter a meeting or your home, touch the frame and say the word neutral. This is a physical anchor that reminds you to reset your emotional state before engaging with others. The notification stack. Every time your phone pings, take 1 conscious breath before you look at the screen. You are training your brain to decouple notification from urgency. By stacking these small acts of non-reaction onto your existing life, you are performing hundreds of reps of emotional discipline every day without needing extra time. Environmental design, removing the friction. Your environment is often the silent architect of your reactions. If you live in a cluttered space, your brain feels a constant low-level sense of overwhelm. If you work in an environment with constant interruptions, your focus muscle is constantly being fatigued. An emotional OS involves environmental auditing. You must identify the friction points in your life that lead to reactivity. Digital environment. Turn off all non-human notifications. A sale alert or a like notification is an unnecessary draw on your attention. Protect your focus as if your life depended on it, because your emotional state does. Physical environment. Clear your desk. A clean desk facilitates a clean mind. Social environment. If there are people in your life who consistently bait you into level 1 reactivity, you must limit their access to you. You cannot stay calm if you are constantly inviting arsonists into your house. The midday reset. Your operating system needs a refresh at the halfway point. Around 1 or 2 p.m., the decision fatigue sets in. This is when your prefrontal cortex starts to lose its grip on the amygdala. The midday reset is a 5-minute protocol. Digital fast, put all devices away. The physiological sigh, inhale deeply, then take a second sip of air at the very top, followed by a long, slow exhale. This is the fastest biological way to down-regulate the nervous system. The value realignment. Ask, have I handed over my remote control today? If so, I am taking it back now. This reset prevents the compounding effect of stress. It ensures that the frustrations of the morning don't bleed into the opportunities of the afternoon.
The evening shutdown, stopping the overthinking loop. The final part of your emotional OS is the shutdown procedure. Many people take their work stress to bed, turning it into the internal reaction of overthinking. To prevent this, you must have a capture system. Before you leave your workspace, write down every unfinished loop, every worry, every task, and every social anxiety. By putting them on paper, you signal to your brain that the data is saved, and it no longer needs to keep the app running in the background. Finally, practice gratitude through the lens of mastery. Instead of just listing things you're thankful for, list the moments where you didn't react. I am proud that I stayed calm when the client was rude. I am proud that I didn't check my phone during dinner. This reinforces the master identity we built in Chapter 10. You are rewarding your brain for its discipline, making it more likely to repeat the behavior tomorrow. Chapter 14. The Tactical Pause, Advanced Tactics for High-Stakes Conflict. In the previous chapters, we built the foundation of emotional sovereignty. You have learned the biology of the hijack, the power of the gray rock, and the design of an emotional operating system. But there are moments in life where being boring or staying calm isn't enough. There are moments of high-stakes conflict, a legal deposition, an aggressive contract negotiation, or a make-or-break argument with a spouse, where you must be more than just non-reactive. You must be strategically active. In these environments, the goal is not just to protect your peace, it is to influence the outcome. To do this, you must master the tactical pause. In the world of elite negotiation and intelligence gathering, the pause is not just a gap in conversation, it is a weapon. It is the ability to use silence and measured communication to dismantle an opponent's aggression and force them to reveal their hand. The psychology of verbal aggression. When someone attacks you verbally, they're looking for a hook. They want to pull you into a high arousal state because, as we have learned, a person in a hijack is easy to predict. If I can make you defensive, I can control the direction of the argument. If I can make you angry, I can make you say something that undermines your credibility. High-stakes conflict is often a game of information asymmetry. The person who speaks the most is usually the one losing power because they're constantly giving away data, their insecurities, their triggers, and their bottom line. The tactical pause reverses this dynamic.
By refusing to fill the silence, you create a psychological pressure that forces the other person to fill it instead. 1. The 4-second rule of silent communication. In a high-stakes argument, our natural instinct is to respond the millisecond the other person stops speaking. We want to correct the record. We want to win. The tactical pause requires you to wait exactly 4 seconds after the other person finishes speaking before you utter a single word. The first second, you absorb the information without a flinch. The second second, you perform a micro S.T.O.P. to ensure you're not in a hijack. The third second, you observe the other person's body language. Are they leaning in? Are they uncomfortable with the silence? The fourth second, you decide if a response is even necessary. This 4-second gap is excruciating for an aggressor. It signals that their words did not have the intended sting. It suggests that you are evaluating them from a position of superiority. Often, during these 4 seconds, the other person will become nervous and begin to walk back their statement or offer a concession just to break the tension you've created. 2. Mirroring and the label, hostage negotiation tactics. Chris Voss, a former FBI hostage negotiator, teaches 2 powerful non-reactive tactics that turn a conflict into a discovery session: mirroring and labeling. Mirroring is the act of repeating the last 3 words, or the most critical 3 words of what the other person just said, followed by a pause. Aggressor, your demands are completely unreasonable and we won't even consider them. You won't consider them? Followed by a 4-second pause. By mirroring, you're not reacting or arguing. You're putting the burden of explanation back on them. They will feel compelled to explain why they won't consider them, giving you more information while you remain safely in your internal citadel. Labeling is the act of identifying the emotion in the room without becoming part of it. You, it seems like you feel frustrated by the current timeline. You, it sounds like there is a lot of pressure on your end to close this quickly. Notice you're not saying, I know you're angry. You're using, it seems like, or it sounds like. This allows you to stay objective. When you label an emotion, you de-escalate the amygdala of the other person. You are performing emotional leadership from Chapter 12 in the middle of a battlefield. 3. The power of no and the negative frame. In high-stakes personal arguments, we're often pressured to say yes to things we don't want. We react to guilt or pressure by overcommitting. Advanced non-reaction involves the negative frame. Instead of asking, is this a good idea, which seeks a yes, ask, is it ridiculous to suggest X? Or would you be totally opposed to Y? People feel much more comfortable saying no than yes, because no feels like protection. By framing your desires in a way that allows them to say no, you remove the conflict. You're not fighting for a yes, you're strategically guiding the no towards your goal. This is the art of getting what you want without ever raising your voice. 4. Handling dirty tactics and personal attacks. In legal or highly toxic personal conflicts, you may encounter dirty tactics, gaslighting, bringing up the past, or attacking your character. The non-reactive master uses the pivot to process. When someone attacks your character, do not defend your character. If you defend it, you're admitting it's up for debate. Instead, call out the process of the conversation. Aggressor, you've always been selfish, just like your father. You, after a 4-second pause, it seems like we're moving away from the financial discussion and into personal history. Does bringing that up help us reach an agreement today? You have just stepped over the trap. You didn't react to the selfish comment. You reacted to the method of the argument. This makes you look like the only adult in the room. In a professional or legal setting, the person who stays on the process while the other stays on the personality always wins the respect of the observers, judges, bosses, or mediators. 5. Silent presence, the physical pause. Your physical body language speaks while your mouth is paused. In high-stakes conflict, your physical presence must be one of open neutrality. Uncross your arms. Crossed arms signal defensiveness, level 1. Maintain soft eye contact. Do not stare aggressively, challenge, and do not look away, submission. Look at the person as if you're watching a fascinating movie. When you combine physical stillness with the tactical pause, you become a psychological black hole. You absorb their energy, their words, and their aggression, and you give back nothing. This is the ultimate form of power. Chapter 15. The Compound Effect, the Lifetime Value of Not Reacting. We began this journey by looking at the remote control, the metaphor for your emotional sovereignty. We traveled through the dark woods of the amygdala, learned the tactical silence of the gray rock, and designed a personal operating system built on the pause. But as we reach the conclusion of this guide, it is time to zoom out. It is time to look beyond the immediate relief of an avoided argument or a managed stressor and look at the trajectory of a life.
In the world of finance, the compound effect is the process by which a small amount of money invested consistently over time grows into a fortune through the power of interest. In the world of human character, the same law applies. Your life is not defined by the 1 or 2 grand gestures you make. It is defined by the 10,000 tiny decisions you make when you are triggered. When you choose not to react today, it may feel like a small victory. But when you choose not to react for 10 years, you are not just staying calm, you are fundamentally altering your destiny. The arithmetic of character. Every time you choose logic over impulse, you are making a deposit into your credibility bank. In the short term, 1 to 12 months, the compound effect of non-reaction looks like reliability. People start to notice that you are steady. In meetings, your voice carries more weight because people know it isn't thinned by emotional static. In your relationships, trust begins to deepen because your partner no longer fears the explosion. You have stopped the leaks in your reservoir. In the medium term, 2 to 5 years, the compound effect looks like opportunity. High-level opportunities, be they in leadership, high-stakes investment, or deep intimacy, are low-volatility zones. They are reserved for people who can handle pressure without cracking. By consistently practicing the pause, you become a magnet for these opportunities. You find yourself in rooms you once only dreamed of, not because you are louder than everyone else, but because you are the most centered. In the long term, 10+ years, the compound effect looks like sovereignty. You reach a stage where you no longer practice not reacting, you simply are unshakable. The neural pathways we discussed in Chapter 7 have become reinforced concrete. You have saved yourself from the divorce tax, the career-ending outburst, and the chronic stress tax that destroys the health of the reactive. You have literally bought back years of your life and millions of dollars in potential lost value. The destiny gap, a tale of 2 paths. To visualize the compound effect, imagine 2 individuals, reactor and master, starting at the exact same point in their careers and lives. The reactor lets their emotions dictate their days. When they are slighted, they retaliate. When they are stressed, they vent. When they are tired, they shut down. Over 10 years, the reactor experiences 3 major career setbacks due to clashes with management, a string of fractured relationships where trust was burned and moments of heat, chronic health issues, high blood pressure, cortisol-induced weight gain from living in a constant state of fight or flight, a reputation as difficult or unpredictable, causing high-value people to avoid collaborating with them. The master uses the tools in this book. They feel the same anger and the same fear as the reactor, but they use the tactical pause.
Over 10 years, the master experiences rapid career ascent because they were the only ones calm enough to lead during the crises of year 3 and year 7. A 10-year marriage built on a foundation of psychological safety, where conflicts were resolved through process rather than personality. Superior health and vitality because their nervous system spent 90% of its time in rest and digest rather than survival mode. A reputation as a cornerstone, attracting mentors, investors, and loyal friends who seek the shade of their composure. At the 10-year mark, the distance between these two people is not a gap, it is a canyon. One is a prisoner of their environment, the other is the architect of it. This is the lifetime value of the 12-millisecond pause. The invisible benefits, health and longevity. We cannot discuss the compound effect without discussing the biological interest you earn. Every time you prevent an amygdala hijack, you are saving your heart, your telomeres, the end caps of your DNA linked to aging, and your brain cells. Chronic reactivity is a form of slow-motion suicide. It keeps the body in a state of systemic inflammation. By choosing the path of the Stoic master, you are essentially giving yourself a longevity dividend. You aren't just living better, you are likely living longer. The person who can remain calm in a crisis at age 40 is far more likely to be vibrant and healthy at age 80. Your non-reaction is a gift you are giving to your future self. The legacy of the anchor. Finally, the compound effect moves beyond you and into the lives of those you love. If you are a parent, your reactivity or lack thereof is the emotional blueprint you are handing to your children. If you react to every broken glass or every bad grade with fire, you are teaching them that the world is a dangerous place and that they are unsafe. You are paving the highways of reactivity in their developing brains. But if you are the anchor, if you meet their chaos with your calm, you are giving them the greatest gift a human can receive: regulation. 10 years from now, your children won't remember the logic of the lectures you gave them. They will remember the vibe of the home. They will remember that when the storm hit, you were the one who didn't move. You are breaking the cycle of generational trauma. This is the social compound interest that outlasts your own life. Closing the circle, your first step into the rest of your life. This book is not a collection of hacks, it is a philosophy of existence. You now possess the map of the 12-millisecond gap. You know that silence is a power move, that overthinking is a trial that requires a defense attorney, and that your biology is a clay you can mold through the S.T.O.P method. As you finish this final chapter, I want you to realize that the master you seek to become is not waiting for you at the end of a long journey. That master is present in the very next moment you feel a sting. The world will continue to be loud. People will continue to be rude. The tigers of the 21st century, the emails, the headlines, the traffic, will continue to howl at your door, but they no longer have your remote control. You have taken it back. You have realized that between the stimulus and the response, there is a space, and in that space lies your freedom. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single pause.